Well, good morning. We got a project, a little chilly out, coming from Tennessee. I've got some other projects. It seemed like it's a constant work in progress, but it has to do with the EFI system, and try to show you the fuel command center. And we're going to talk about the fuel command center when you go with the FiTech system. A few years ago, I replaced the 4-barrel with the Go EFI 4 throttle body, whatever you might want to call it. The system, this is a 302. The system requires a high fuel pressure, so I purchased what they call the command center. The Bronco has dual 2 fuel tanks. So coming from the fuel tank, this filter system, you can see where the fuel level is coming from the mechanical pump from the engine. So that's pumping the fuel inside of this system, the command center, and the command center's got a fuel pump, electric fuel pump inside of it. So you got the fuel coming in, the fuel going to the EFI. This is the overflow hose. Inside of the fuel command center was a float. Was because I took it out. But what it would do is fill this up from the pressure from the fuel pump off of the engine. That would shut off and allow raise the pressure here, but this is your pressure coming from the electric fuel pump. What I was experiencing, because I would drive slow in parades with this in the heat, and your gasoline has a low boiling point, and at times the motor would stop running, not because it was out of fuel, but I think the problem was inside of this command center. So I discovered, and at one time the float valve stuck open, and on the return line I started overflowing in one of my 2 fuel tanks. I went in here, this lid, you can see where I smacked it with a hammer, but it was actually a board, and I opened this container up, took the float valve off, so whenever the engine is running, it is running the fuel all the way back into the fuel tank. And if you don't have the right fuel tank selected, then you end up overflowing that tank. So what I'm going to do is with this valve, this fuel valve switch, is put one so it comes from this going back to the fuel tank and split it to where it's going to go. I'll have the selector switch where I can select which fuel tank it's going back to. Now keep in mind, there was not a lot of electronics on these vehicles, and out of the 2 fuel tanks, if you want to switch, right under the driver's seat is the fuel selector switch. I'm going to replace that out with one of those electronic switches as well. And what's really cool about the whole system that I'm going to install, I labeled the fuel tank selector switch. This tells you that you're reading the fuel gauge off of the rear or the front. There's some extra terminals on the back side of this. What I'm going to do is run a hot wire to the switch, from the switch, because I'm concerned about the amount of voltage taking place through the wires, and I don't want to melt wires, burn wires, but I'll show you the wiring diagram or the wires the way I'm going to run that. Right now your main tank is the rear tank, and the reason that's important, when this is hooked up, no electricity will be going to any of the switches for the fuel tank selector, nor to transfer the return line to whichever fuel tank that it's going to. But however, when you flip that switch, it will hit the relay. Both of the selector valves, the one I just showed you, it will decide it will swap that, so all of the return fuel from the command center will be going to the front tank, so there's no chance of overflowing a fuel tank because you're not on the right setting. I'm going to take out the manual selector switch, put the electric one in place, and it's up underneath the body, and issues as far as vapor lock or anything coming through this system. So constantly fuel will be flowing through this to keep the temperature cold, not necessarily cold, but cooler than just normal out of the command center. So constant circulation with that fuel, and if I'm traveling down the road, the interstate, at any time I can flip a switch and automatically it will be going to the other auxiliary tank. Let me try to explain what we're working on. So from the battery, I have a fuse holder. From the fuse holder, we're going to come to a relay. Now from this fuse holder to the relay, so from the 87 terminal, there will be a wire running to both of the positive terminals on these fuel selector switches. Keeping in mind, one is for the return line going back to the fuel tank, the other is coming from the fuel tank going to the fuel pump, the mechanical fuel pump, and it's allowing the vacuum to pull up. So you've got 85 and 86. 85 and 86. Now, if you remember, I showed you the fuel selector switch that shows the fuel tank that you're using per the gauges on the dash. We will take 85, that's going to be grounded to the chassis, grounded to the vehicle. 86 will go to the switch that's on the dash, and from the dash there's going to be an extra wire. It's going to be a hot wire that we need to add to the terminal on that switch. So on the back of the fuel selector switch for the gauges on the dash, there's going to be a center pole and one to the right, so when we switch it to the fuel tank that is in the front fuel tank, that will allow the electricity to make those valves work, so we have that selector. I will pull this out and we'll take a look at the back side. Fuse block running to the relay, relay running to the pump, number 85 on here. Number 85 needs to be grounded to the chassis, so we could ground that to whatever we use to bolt that to the frame of not the frame, but the body of the Bronco. And that's the way to do it. Have this under the hood here. We could put it back up under here somewhere. And then a single wire running through the firewall from the fuel selector switch on the dash that will operate the relay. I did buy the pigtail, so that way I could use hot shrink tubing, put it to the relay, have all the wires in place for the installation. Front rear, this is your fuel selection switch, as well as it'll tell you on the dash reading the gauges, because there are 2 fuel tanks. Okay. So here is what was finally done. There's one of these up here, another one in the back. The one in the back, of course, it's I did run a relay. I don't know if you can still see the relay. I mounted it out here under the hood. One wire to this. This other wire runs back to one just like this. And if you recall, this is from the FiTech command center. This is the return hose. So I want it to return back to the fuel tank that it had come from. And once again, that selection is done with the switch I just showed you. That switch will select the fuel tank I want to get fuel out of, it will register on the gas gauge on the dash, and then the return line will return that fuel back to the right tank, and we won't get swapped up and have gas running out on the ground. But I had installed the relay, and that relay, this green wire off of the harness goes to the inside to the switch. The other terminal on the switch runs to, when we turn the ignition switch on or on accessories, that runs power to here, and when to the switch, if we turn the power switch on, it runs electricity to the relay. The blue wire is a ground, but it sets the relay to where you can barely see it back here. That's your hot wire coming from the battery. I do have a 20 amp fuse right now that I'm trying on that, and when the power hits the relay, it does the connection from the power, the yellow wire running the electric valves. Here is the fuse block that goes to that. This other one is actually for an electric fan. The FiTech allows you to run an electric fan. I don't have the mechanical fan any longer, so I did a relay. I'll show you that. So I had put in a relay for the fan as well, so whenever it kicks on. But hopefully this will help somebody out there that are running into similar situations with certainly a relay for fog lights, for electric fan, for multiple uses. What a lot of the updated things that you can do to vehicles really require a relay to get the proper amount of voltage, amps, to that device to make them run to operate properly without melting wires, melting switches, and having a fire inside your vehicle. Hopefully this helps somebody out there, but certainly like, share, subscribe, and as we continue to do things here on the farm, we'll keep you up to date on how you might be able to fix it. You all have a blessed day.